general wisdom with backdrops is keep it simple because you don't want to take people's attention away from the trains. And I've decided that's an excuse for people who want to have, backdrops that are like 3 colors, spot, spot, spot. And that's fine if you like it, but I was wondering, could I actually use the backdrop to try to extend things more? And I figured that I didn't know what the heck I was doing, so I ought to practice a bit. So I got some of these El Cheapo canvases from Dick Blick. It's at Walker and Cedar Hills Boulevard. There's a little shopping center there. And I started playing around with them, and I thought, well, that's not too bad. This is after spending, like a dozen hours watching these YouTube videos on how to paint stuff. So then I thought, well, I can do better than that. So I tried this guy, and this is an argument for why you should never paint anything that you're going to look at not in the light that you're painting it under. Because in bright sunlight, this actually looks kind of good, but not so good in the train room and not so good here. And I thought, well, I'm also going to be having to paint things with some ground underneath it, and well, that's okay, but not really special. So I tried another one. This is getting a little better. I put some texture in the ground here using the Bob Ross method, which is you load up a brush and you go stab, 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 stab to make a texture on it. Then I did this guy the other day, and this is starting to look a bit better, except that I'm thinking if I were to try to take this and put it behind those locomotives over there, this is kind of too big for HO scale. So you've got to kind of ride herd on how big things are going to be. So then I did this guy, and this guy is a lot more promising. So I figured out the light control problem here. You can actually see this without having to have a 2,000 watt floodlight shining on it. And the stuff on it is more reasonable size. If we were to put this behind the trains, it would actually almost look appropriate. And I thought, well, I can take that, but I wanted to have more in the middle, so I did this. And the trees aren't too bad, but the composition sucks, So, and then this is the one I did yesterday. So this is the most recent one. I thought I should practice for you guys, because I am not a stupendous, super duper artist or anything. Yeah?
How many of those can you do a day?
I can do 2 of these a day before my wrist complains. And if you're painting backdrop this way, you're not going to get your backdrop done in in a week. It's going to take time. The 6 feet, or I guess it's 8 feet of backdrop behind Junction City. I was working on it, and my wife helped me a bit, and I think the elapsed time when we were working on it was, we worked on it for about a week or something. So you can do maybe a foot of finished backdrop a day. So, it's going to take a while. It's supposed to be a hobby, I guess. If I was doing this for money, I couldn't, you wouldn't be able to afford what I charge for my services, and I wouldn't be able to sell them because nobody would buy it. So with that, I thought maybe I'd get started on doing the live demo portion of this madness over here. I brought this is, you get like 8 of these for $10 or something at Dick Blick, so that, really good for practicing on. But I thought for the purposes of today, I should do a little bigger one. I cheated and I did the sky on this because I was worried about running out of time, because I start sitting down and I think, how long did I spend here? And I thought, oh, 2 hours, that's too long. So, I've been developing a fetish for paintbrushes, and I've got fan brushes, round brushes, tree and texture brushes, chisel brushes, blender brushes, I'm not sure what this is. I've got rigger brushes.
That looks like a jug.
Yeah, these are called rigger brushes because use them to paint. People used to use them to paint the rigging on ship pictures, so that you can. These things work for drawing really, really fine lines. And we're using a bunch of colors. Most of the colors here are Liquitex. This one's the primary color, which is dark hooker's green, or deep hue, I guess it's called. And it turns out that this is about the same color as the foreground trees I have. So this is like an ideal color for painting trees. So let's get started. Got a old palette tray I was using. This is a California roll lid from Wajimaya. And you can see that it gets a little crusty after a while. And when that happens, you just sort of get rid of it. And
Order most
if you eat as much California roll as we do, you don't run out. Or you can get one of these guys, which lets you spread out a bit more. Or if you really want to be a real artist, you can go buy a professional palette board like Bob Ross and get an easel so you can stand there and do everything. But that's a lot like work. You may notice I got a bunch of water jars up here. So I've got first brush rinse, second brush rinse, and a jar with just a little bit of water in it, so when the brushes are dirty I can stick them there. One of the problems with acrylic paint is it dries really quickly. And so if you put a brush down and work on something for 10 minutes, you're going to have a petrified brush. The one you put down is going to require some serious cleaning. If you let it sit for half an hour, it may not be recoverable anymore. So got to keep an eye on it. Okay, so I'm going to pour out a little bit of ivory black here. I don't know why they call it ivory black. I thought ivory was sort of white. Some Hooker's deep green hue. And a little bit of burnt umber. Some raw sienna. Bit of yellow. This is the key to the sky. It's called cerulean blue, and I mix this with titanium white. I try to paint more blue and then progress to more white down here. And if you work at it, you just use a brush like this, which is this isn't an artist brush. This is like a Home Depot or Lowe's brush. But the key is you want bristles that are relatively stiff, and you don't want a bunch of stray bristles coming off the side, or you wind up with whiskers on stuff. But you just sort of work back and forth. And I hope you'll forgive me for not demoing that. Let's see.
Where do you buy your paint at? Is that Dick Blick as well?
Yeah, I get it at Dick Blick.
So these are how much? I don't know if you call it a tube or what.
What, a cube?
A container. How much is it for a container of the Liquitex?
Depends on which one you get. The Series 1 I think is like $5 or $6, and the Series 2 is like $1 or $2 more expensive. Series 3 is $1. It depends on how much hassle it is to grind the pigments and get it right. They charge more for exotic colors, or maybe it's for the colors that don't sell as well. This is matte medium, which is sort of I paint with oil, I'd have some sort of gum spirit or something you dilute the paint with. You dilute acrylic with matte medium, or at least you can. You can also dilute it with with water. And let's see, this is parchment. This is an older bottle. And I really don't know what I'm going to paint here yet. Sometimes I don't know what I'm going to paint until it actually shows up on the canvas. So I'm going to start by grabbing a little bit of water. I've got a little cup here that's just got water in it that I'm not going to rinse a brush in. And let's grab a bit of the Hooker's green. Oh, it's starting to sound like Bob Ross or something.
Just ordinary tap water or distilled?
I got this from the sink in the back room. I was going to bring a bottle of water with me, but I kind of forgot to do it. And we'll mix a little bit of this raw sienna in, and a bit of yellow. And the brush is too wet, so let's put a hill in. And you can tell that it's wet because of all the brush marks that are showing up here. So I'm going to need to work at this a bit to get it Right, and I don't like that color, it's a little bit too dark. Distance hill should be lighter than foreground hill, so let's add a little bit of white to it and try to lighten that little bugger up. And we're gonna work in layers, or I'm gonna work in layers here, you know, distant hill, then layer stuff coming forward. So, clean the brush off a little bit, try to get most of the paint off of it, and then I'm just gonna stick him in the jar with a little bit of water in the bottom. You don't want the, if you do that, you don't want the water to come up here, because that'll wreck the brush. So we ought to put some trees on there, but it's a little wet yet, so here's an attachment that's, well, it would be an attachment that's useful if it... Maybe if I press the power button here. Okay. And a little bit of this and the paint suddenly dry, and if you can paint over the top of it without moving it.
How long would it take to dry by itself, Charlie?
Oh, it'd be, you know, it wouldn't be tacky any more than 20 minutes.
20 minutes, wow.
Yep, and it'd be effectively dry in 5 or 10, but this speeds things up if you're impatient like I am. So let's see if we can make some trees here. And I might give the illusion that I know what I'm doing, but I can assure you this is really just an illusion. I want to mix up a green that's sort of a conifer green, but it's a little bit lighter. So this is kind of a Bob Ross way of doing things, but kind of dab a little bit here. And we're not going to try to get everything perfect here on the first pass. We're going to come back and do some more of this with a different color. The multicolor is what gives the layering effect. If you look at a tree, you see that's just look out the window. How many different colors do you see in those trees out there? Some are light and some are dark. And Michael James Smith sort of goes in and tries to paint the leaves individually. We're not going to do that today. I've done that, and it can be really nice, but it takes a lot of time. And using a fan brush to do this can speed things up a lot. So let's put some more trees in here. And you notice that that sort of disappears when we go into the green as opposed to where we were putting the trees against the sky. And that's pretty light, so let's grab a little more green and work that in here. I'm going to grab just a touch of matte medium and stick that in to try to dilute this paint out a little bit more. And this is going to be much darker now. And if we're careful and we just touch with the very corner of the fan brush, we can get some control in here that work good. Can you all see this on the screen very well, or should, Jeff, can you zoom that in a little more? Maybe move the camera back 6 inches, from, to your, not back to you, but to your right. Yeah, that'll give it a little better angle, and hopefully that'll help a bit. And as soon as we start with the two colors, suddenly it starts to come a bit more alive. With one color it was a bit flat. Now you might say those treetops look nice, but they actually don't really look that nice. So let's clean this fan brush off a bit, and into the holding tank he goes. And remember I was talking about the rigger brushes? This is a #1 rigger brush I'm about to grab here. And the key to using a rigger brush is you need to have really thin paint. So I'm going to grab some water here and let's see if I can. And I'm just gonna mix it up until it's like ink instead of paint. Needs a little more water. And then I'm gonna pull the brush out, twisting it as I go, and look at how tiny a point we get on that. So now up here we go, and let's try to, can you see the details that are going on here? And we're just putting the very tops of the trees on here. I'm not trying to, well, this one needs some more work, but I'm not trying to paint the trees completely with this brush. That would, you know, we could do that. It's going to take more time. But so if the fan brush left some trees that look like they've got leprosy or polio or something, you can correct that by using this brush. Oh, this is where the guys on YouTube would speed up the video and do a time lapse, or I'm doing like this, but I'm out of Scallusion water, for those of you who remember Star Trek, and so you're going to have to put up with real time here.
Charlie, are you pointing the tops?
Yes.
Making branches at the tops, or just coloring over?
I'm pointing the tops. I'm trying to make the trees look somewhat pointy. We sort of expect our conifer trees to look pointy. So that's what I'm trying to do here. You can come up and check it out, of course, when and you know, yeah, it's a bit tedious, but time goes by quickly, and if you got some music playing in the background, or if you happen to have your wife standing 3 feet away from you doing the same thing on the tree she's been painting, it's not a bad way to spend some time. I mean, it could be worse. You could be hand spiking 30 feet of track. Or soldering resistors to the axles of a 250 car fleet that you've decided needs to be able to, you know, set off current detection detectors. Let's try to get some more color detail into these trees. So I've got a darker color here, and I'm just going to kind of go in and do the little dots. I'm not going to do all that. You can see what I'm doing here. Now that's a bit tedious unto itself, right? So there's a faster way, actually. Actually, these rigger brushes clean really, really well. I think it's because I use the paint so thinned out on them that just take them and rinse them and then wipe them off, and this one's good to go. So let's get out the, okay. You can look, if you see this guy, you can see how there's sort of a chisel on him like this, so when you press against the canvas like this, the brush spreads out, and suddenly it's like you got a whole bunch of different brushes there. And then you go touch, touch, touch. And this works better with thicker paint instead of thinner paint. It's a little bit too dark, so let's lighten it up a touch. So this is a faster way to, you know, add foliage detail. Look how fast that's going compared to using the rigger brush and trying to, you know, put individual features in. The place where the individual features really show up, if you're willing to do the effort, is if you've got a foreground deciduous tree, and going in there and having the patience to do the leaves on it just really makes that thing snap. How are we doing on time?
About 55 minutes.
grab a little parchment and mix that in here. And maybe a little bit of bushes, you know, sitting out there in the field somewhere. Okay, that's enough for over there. This guy, we need to clean him because he holds paint like crazy. And into the holding tank he goes. Let's switch brushes, and I'm going to use the chisel brush now, sort of a and how dark is he? Oh, that's really dark. Let's lighten him up. You can't, I really don't have an eye for what colors are going to be like when I'm mixing them here on the palette. But if you put them up on the painting in a place where, you know, it's sort of unobtrusive, then let's get some matte medium mixed in there.
So it's a matte medium basically to help dilute the paint a little?
Yeah, it's a
thin it
thinner.
out?
It's a thinner with the same base that the paint has for its.
Okay.
And I'm taking the brush and I'm wobbling it a little bit here to try to, you know, give it a little bit of, you know, the hill isn't absolutely flat. The farther away the hill is, you're trying to paint, the lighter color it should be, and the less distinct whatever features you decide to put on it should be. Far away hill, you just don't see that much on it except sort of a blend of colors, and if it's really far away, all you're going to see is sort of a hazy color that's just one color you won't see. Am I using my hand to cover up the camera at all? Can you see what I'm doing here? And let's mix up a little more. Get some more matte medium. So you can see I'm already making a mess of this big palette. What do you know? It's almost the same color. And I think I'm going to put another hill in so it won't have to come down too far with this. Of course, the thinner it gets, the less it covers. So if you can use that to advantage sometimes. If you get thin paint, you suddenly have to pay a lot of attention to where the brush marks are going.
What are you using for material on your actual backdrop at home, Charlie, on your layout? Is that wall boards on the wall, or?
Yeah, it's all drywall. Now you could use masonite. You know, for the backdrops, when I start, or after I get the backdrops up, actually, the center peninsula is plywood, but I'd slap a coat of sky blue paint on it and just monochrome. I don't try to grade it like this at all. If I want clouds on that, I come by with an airbrush and I get some golden titanium white acrylic for oil brushes, or not, for air brushes, not oil brushes. Listen to what I mean, not what I say, please. And I sort of go around and I try to make, you know, amorphous clouds. I don't go for the well-defined cumulus formations because those look great when you're looking at them from the right angle. But if you look at them from over here or over there, they look really funny. Mm-hmm. So I try to keep things general.
Do you use a stencil for your clouds or not? You just
No, I don't.
freehand them?
I just use the airbrush and I sort of
And then freehand them.
you know, freehand them in and out. There is I do have a video of that on my website. If you go to the how-to section of bcsjrr.com, Bear Creek and South Jackson Railroad.com, there's a how-to section in there, and there's a video of me showing how I do the airbrush stuff. Okay, so let's try to do some really quick trees now. And these I'm going to have to be a little more careful with because these are going to be bigger. And I'm sorry, but I got to move that this one. And this guy needs to be cleaned, or I'm violating my own rule about cleaning brushes right away. If you didn't catch that website, talk to me after we finish it. I'm just using the fan brush here, and this is, you can see Bob Ross do this all the time. Presto, tree. And that's straight from Bob.
And it's a happy little
I was gonna
tree.
say, is it happy?
And there are no mistakes, there are only happy accidents. Yeah, not quite so happy accidents. And if you watch Michael Smith do this, he's using only the tip of the brush, that fan brushing. That's one of the reasons, see, the fan brush doesn't have ink on all of it, just on a corner. So I'm trying to touch just the corner to the ground there. And that means that if your fan brushes start developing whiskers, get a sharp X-Acto blade and get rid of it, because it's gonna make funny whisker marks in the sky. It's like that country western song about ghost conifers in the sky. And these are pretty monochrome, aren't they, except for where we picked up some of the hillside color, because I didn't dry this hillside before I started. And if you are clever, you can arrange for the branch tips to go up or down depending on whether you want the tree to be an upper or a downer. Let's add a little bit of yellow into this paint mix. And I think I got too much paint in here. This works better if you don't have quite so much paint in the brush. And I think maybe it's not quite light enough, so I'm going to grab just a skosh of titanium white and put that in. And there, now the tree's starting to look three-dimensional with that color in there. It's amazing how just using just the two colors and not even trying to paint individual branches, just sort of dancing the branch around like it's, you know, some sort of festival or something. And I think I need a little more darkness there. Let's use the other corner of the brush for that side. I said let's use the other corner of the brush for that side. And let's see if we can get a so let me hold the painting up so you can see it a little better. Hopefully you can see it better. And we could be, painting a bunch of these trees here. But let's grab our big brush again. Let's dry him out because he's way too wet now. And gonna want a darker color yet. Let's see. Let's go in there. So I'm trying to mix myself up a darker, and I've got the black here. And turns out you mix black and yellow, you get green with these paints. That's how it looks strange. Trying not to dribble the matte medium on the floor. Something tells me that a rec center wouldn't appreciate that. Okay, so in keeping with the theory that things get a little darker as you get closer to the front. And you see, this isn't really covering terribly well over here, so I'm resorting to whatever I have to do to get the paint to stick to the canvas. All right. I apologize for being so quick on this, but I'd be apologizing even more for not completing all this stuff for you. So, just have to put up with me. Oh, I got a problem. Problem is, we didn't cover it at a place here where you can see the back, the rear hill through the front one. This jar of paint is almost gone. But I have another jar. I expect that I know that this stuff goes fast, the Hooker's Deep Green. This is a blender brush, and there's an awful lot of moisture on the screen here, so this isn't really optimal. I should have dried it out a little bit more. A blender brush is useful for blending colors together. This is awfully wet. Well, this hill is getting close enough to us so that we'd expect to see some more detail in it. So let's see if we can just put some more detail in whatever the heck's on this hill in the way of vegetation. It's green, so I guess there must be something growing on it. Before I do that, let's dry it out a little bit. It's pretty soggy. Blender brushes pick up a huge amount of extra paint, so this guy gets the double cleaning before I wipe him off, you know. Bit of extra paint on him. Into the bucket he goes. Got a, what's this, a number, wow, this is a big, this is number 6 round brush. Let's try to mix ourselves up a tree trunk color. Actually, I'm ahead of myself then. Let's not do that right now. If anybody told you I knew what I was doing with this, they were sadly misleading you. So I've got the, what's called a tree and texture brush here. And remember this guy, he's the one with the chisel tip? Well, I got his big brother over here. Same thing, except bigger, so let's just try to, I'm gonna mix a little bit of raw sienna in with the green. That's gonna give us a bit more of an olive color than than just the color we had. And it's too much brown. A little yellow. Just sort of dab, 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 dab. Not hitting really hard, not firing the brush into the canvas, Bob Ross. How many of you knew that Bob Ross got his, was a protege of a guy named William Alexander, who had a TV show on public television in the late 60s, early 70s called The Magic Method of Oil Painting. Bob's real key is he coat the whole canvas with this thin white paint, and since it's oil, it stays liquid for a long time, and then you blend everything together in it. That's why when he blends the water, he can go back and forth, and he pulls the colors down from the trees at the lake edge, and then he blends back and forth, and it looks like reflections. So that's really what's going on there. And you can't do that with acrylics very well. Acrylics just don't like to blend that much because they don't stay wet long enough. You can do a certain amount of that. I'm doing it right here. If we're looking at the colors that are going on after I've been painting a while, you can see that they're definitely different color than the, oh, that's too much white. Definitely different colors from the ones that I started with. Can you adjust the camera down a little bit to get the palette tray in here, Jeff? So you can see what that one tarnation I'm doing. It's hard to see right at this angle. I suppose I should have brought my own theater projector in, but it's screwed to the ceiling and I didn't want to take it down. You don't want to have too much paint on when you're doing this stuff. Too much paint means you put down a blob of paint. But if I do this right, it should put down something that looks like there's a bunch of different brushes that have been going at it. The other thing you can use to do this is you can use the big brush, the 1.5 inch guy I had. You can use him, but he has to be dry to do that, so he's not dry, so we're doing it this way. You just sort of work your way around, dabbing here and there. And this hillside is definitely looking like there's some vegetation growing on it now. You need to make some decisions about here. Actually, should have made these decisions some time ago. And the decision is, what color is the foreground scenery going to be where it's going to meet the background scenery? And I've had some good luck using chunks of sill floor and woodland scenics fine leaf foliage and bringing that up to the backdrop. But you need to try to continue the color of whatever versions of those you use up into the backdrop. If the backdrop's a very brilliant green but the foreground's sort of a drab green, that's going to look really funny unless you can bring the foreground up so it curves down and then the backdrop comes up behind it so you can't actually see the joint between the two. And yes, I am a brush junkie now. My wife has accused me of being a brush junkie. But I plead ignorance to that because I don't know what the brushes do, so Jeff said he likes to experiment and he destroys motors while I destroy brushes trying to figure out what they'll do.
Does your wife ever tell you you're doing it wrong?
She has from
Oh.
time to time. But normally she is very supportive. She's glad I'm doing something that she likes to do, and you know, we can paint backdrop together in the train room.
Do you find the feel of it is much different when you're standing painting a backdrop versus when you're doing it sitting down like you are now?
Yes, but a lot of the difference comes from I'm painting on canvas here, and the canvas has got this big texture to it, but the backdrop is much smoother. So there's a bigger difference between painting on something smooth versus painting on something that's got a lot of texture to it. Some artists cover their canvas with stuff called gesso, which smooths out some of the bumpliness of the, is bumpliness a word? Well, it smooths it out. And, but that gesso has its own texture. Now the wood panel over there is right behind where Jeff is sitting, the one that I painted yesterday. That's a piece of wood that was pre-coated with gesso. And I wanted to just try that to see how that would work. I don't recommend those for practice pieces because the canvases are $10 for like 8 of those things. Well, that's $10 for one of them. So,
Does the smooth surface tend to emphasize brush strokes?
yes, it certainly does. And since this is another brush that sucks up paint like crazy, let's clean
Drywall would be considered a smoother surface
than canvas.
than canvas.
Definitely. If you are unfortunate enough to be in a room where somebody thoughtfully textured the walls of the room, you know, it might be, oh, I hesitate to say this even, but it might be worthwhile to either sand the texturing off or slap a layer of spackle on to sand that smooth before you start, because that texture can show up, and if you got light shining on it like this, then you start seeing, you know, Will's nodding yes, you've been there and done that. Show us your t-shirt. Okay, so we got that there. Let's put a, see, I was going to use the this big brush, the big dog brush, to try to mix up tree trunk color. So let's go back to mixing up tree trunk color over here and get a little bit of white in there and some matte medium so that it'll paint more smoothly, and twist the brush to try to point it. It's not a very good point. And this is going to be a big tree. And let's do another big tree right here. And another one, go closer in. Oh, let's get some more paint first. And I'm trying to make the trees so that their tops aren't all the same height. Okay, so we got the tree trunks in, but wait, there's more.
So when you're doing that, as you're coming down, are you pushing the brush in a little tighter to fan it out, to shape your trees?
I'm sorry, what? Oh, yes, I'm trying to make the
Start out real fine and then just push in
yeah,
a
I'm
little
barely
harder?
touching the brush when I start the downstroke, and then I'm pushing much harder towards the bottom. How hard? Well, you'll have to experiment.
Yep.
If I can do it, I'm sure you guys can. The biggest problem to painting backdrops is the same problem that you have with doing scenery. You got to be willing to start. So I'm gonna put this brush away, and where's my, here we go. Got another round brush here. This one's a much finer point than that last one. Let's try to mix up a little bit of a different color here. There we go. Put a little more matte medium in. Okay, so I can actually put my pinky here to support me now, which I couldn't have done before. And this is a slightly different color. Here it's slightly darker. Looks like I'm going to be painting as though the sun was coming in over my right shoulder here. Some people have much steadier hands than I do. In fact, I dare say there's a lot of people who have steadier hands than I do.
Are you going on top or to the side?
I'm going on top. Let's try to do that even a little darker. I'm going to grab just a touch of ivory black. I don't know why. Where do they get the black ivory from?
Oxymoron.
That's it. It's a piano term. The black keys are black ivory.
Oh, okay.
So you're doing this to shadow the trunk?
Yeah, I'm trying to give the trunks a little bit of a,
You're not doing it for bark detail or anything, it's just
well,
general?
we could do bark detail, but that's sort of a time sink, and we are
Yeah.
getting close to time here. I'm just trying to get that. And now let's put a tiny bit of titanium white in there. A little more than that. Okay. And spin the brush to point it. And then over here.
To the other side.
So we're trying to put the trunk highlights on the right and the trunk dark lights on the, is there such a word as dark lights? I guess that's sort of like black ivory.
Low lights?
Low lights or shadow.
Highlight, low light.
Yeah, if you do this wrong, it looks like the trunk's made out of a 4x4. You do it right, the trunk suddenly takes on a bit of life. Oh, that's kind of a bit lighter than I was hoping for. Oh well. We'll have to deal with it. One of the advantages of doing this in the train room is I don't have time pressure. If I get called to dinner or get called to go to a train meet or something, I can just sort of leave it and go off. Hardly perfect, but it will have to do. Let's go back to the rigger brushes. I'm going to grab the number 1 rigger brush, and let's grab some water and some of that Hooker's deep green. And remember, the key to doing this is the paint's got to be really thin. This is one of the places where oil paint really shines, because oil paint keeps its color. When you dilute it, the color doesn't thin out as much, even though the paint is quite thin. And acrylics does. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do the unthinkable and start painting the top of a And I'm not going to paint the whole tree like this, because I could easily blow the rest of the afternoon doing that. I'm just going to paint the upper bit of it, then we're going to come back and finish this off with a fan brush. And that way you get the fine detail at the top against the sky, where you can see it and appreciate it. I mean, how are you going to appreciate the fine detail down here where it's against a darker area? And that guy, Michael James Smith, is the evil person who got me started doing this. For some reason he puts it in time lapse and just, he just blows through it in no time. And then to your surprise he says, okay, that took about 3 hours. And what? And actually, it only took 5 minutes. I'm really sort of just squiggling the brush here. And if I wanted to really paint this finely, I've got a number 0 rigger brush that paints even smaller lines than this guy does. A rigger brush is very similar to what's called a liner brush, and if you go into an art store and say you want a rigger brush, they're going to kind of look at you a little funny because they probably don't have them at all. But a liner brush does pretty much the same thing. If you want a rigger brush, these are from a company called Rosemary in England, and they're actually the kind that Michael James Smith uses, the brand. And there's a importer in this country, Wind River Art Supply in Arizona, that carries them, and they're the only place you can get them in this country. But they're happy to mail order stuff to you. You can see how fine those lines were I was drawing? This is why they used them to paint rigging on ships.
Is there a number size on that brush, like an odd or a double odd or a 3
This is a
odd?
number 1.
Number 1.
This one is a 0,
Mhm.
and this one is a 2.
And they're all rigging brushes?
Yeah, rigger kind of refers to the bristle style. The bristles are very soft. They're very floppy. When I rinse it off, it comes out, and you hold it under the water in the sink, and it deflects. So the thing that's giving it its structure is the fact that I've got this ink-like paint in it, and that I twist it. You notice how when can you see how when I'm pulling it through the paint, I'm twisting it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what gives it the point, and then the ink holds the bristles together, sort of like a cord of many threads, and that gives it the structural integrity that you can actually paint out. All right, where's the fan brush? But because we're painting with such thin ink, and the bristles are really, really flexible, this is enough to clean it for now. I'll wash it, when I'm cleaning up to leave here, I'm definitely gonna wash it. I'm not gonna walk out of here without cleaning these brushes. That would be a freaking disaster.
You can finish up between, say, 45 and 50.
Yeah.
You still have to do the boxcar thing.
Yeah. So I think we're just gonna paint these, put some foliage in these trees, and we're gonna call it done for today. So, ran out of yellow. We call it mellow yellow. Acrylics, you tend to go from dark and work your way to light. With watercolors, it's the other way around. You start with light and work your way to the dark colors. Let's put a little more detail up there. Okay. So if I do this right, the difference between the top, which I sort of hand painted the branches on, and the down where we are now, where I'm using the fan brush to sort of dab them in. It won't be too apparent. It'll be, it'll flow together fairly well, especially if I come up here and put some of this color in. I feel very Bob Rossi when I'm doing this. except my hair is long. And I don't have a squirrel on my shoulder. Actually, if you live next to a hazelnut orchard, you probably are nowhere near as fond of squirrels as Bob was. Is that so, Fred?
I have a couple making a home in my crawl space, if you know how to get rid of them. Let me know, you're welcome to having.
How I got it.
Cat. I've got 2 cats and they aren't even touching him.
Well, apparently you got the wrong kind of cats.
Yeah, I fully agree with that.
Let's lighten this green up quite a bit. Putting some yellow in there. And I think there's a tiny bit of the raw sienna left. And let's see if I can reach across here without making a mess of everything.
They moved the triples and just walked away from it.
And once you get to this stage in the painting, that starts to, the trees start to really pop. And makes you feel like, hey, maybe I almost know what I'm doing, but then I think, nah.
I live in the southeast corner. The train takes about 4 minutes from my place. So I'm up here all the time.
Let's try to get it even lighter than it is. This is going to be a really light highlight color.
Oh, yeah.
And
There's lots of doors at 4 o'clock.
just the lightest touch here with this brush. Well, I think that's about it for now, because we're about out of time. Turn the other lights on, somebody. Let's make it easier, it makes it harder. So, thank you all for
It
coming.
does get a 3D effect.
And, feel free to come up so you can really see what's here. It's hard to see it on the screen. I got some brushes to clean.